Welcome to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast, Achieving Peace Through Compassion. This podcast is a recording of the Dharma Talks given during our Sunday service.
Good pre-afternoon. I was invited to come talk about one of the most profound and sometimes uncomfortable subjects in Buddhist practice, death. More specifically, how we train the mind when death arrives. I know what you're all sitting there thinking, Trav, you're a handsome young man. How could you teach me about death? Well, you'd be right. It's been almost 36 years since the last time I died, and I don't really remember it. But to quote the rapper Propaganda, I've learned enough to know that I don't know that much. So it's my hope that we can both learn a little something together. This talk comes after studying Chapter 11, How to Train While Dying, in The Power of Mind by Kintro Lojong. This chapter itself draws heavily from the classic Lojong tradition preserved in the 7 Points of Mind Training by Geshe Chekwa Geshe Dorje. To me, it kind of felt like the whole book was leading up to this one chapter. The teachings on mind training, often called Lojong, give us a way to transform every experience into the path of awakening. That includes pain, conflict, loss, and ultimately, the experience of dying itself. To train in this way, Kintro Lojong instructs us to use what's called the 5 forces, or 5 powers. The last few weeks we've looked heavily into these 5 forces, so I'm not going to go too much into detail about each one. I'll run through them now, so if you want, just tune me out for the rest of the service. I totally understand. So the 5 powers. The first is the power of the positive seed. This involves letting go of all material attachments and unfinished business. Practitioners are encouraged to give away their possessions to worthy causes to ensure the mind is not tethered to worldly belongings. Generously giving in this way will ensure your seed of compassion will bear fruit in a future without you in it. It is truly showing compassion after death. The second power is the power of aspiration. Kind of straightforward. The practitioner makes strong prayer to never be separate from bodhicitta during this death process, the bardo, or future lives. Again, yeah, it's kind of self-explanatory. The third one is the power of reproach or regret. This one I kind of struggled with a little bit myself, but hopefully I can dissolve it for you a little here. This is the act of rejection of self-clinging. It involves recognizing that the self and the physical body are not solid or permanent, and therefore it is our clinging to self that is the root cause of all our suffering. If we practice generating regret for self-clinging, we will carry that with us into our next life and avoid these same actions in the future. It is extremely important to note that this is regret without shame. It's something very hard to do, but with training and with time, this will come naturally. The next is the power of resolution, or the propelling force. A firm decision to maintain mindfulness and focus on bodhicitta throughout the transition of death. It is a strong stand to maintain sanity and basic egolessness, even as appearances dissolve. The final one is the power of familiarization. This refers to habitual practice of these techniques while alive so they become second nature at the moment of death. Having a fellow practitioner who does the same daily practice, reciting the prayers and mantras, this is indispensable to turning your mind towards Dharma in your final days. Physically, this may include assuming the sleeping lion or the simhasana posture used by the Buddha when he transitioned from this life. Someone out there has a statue of this that I gave them. It involves lying on the right side, right hand under the head, left arm perpendicular to the body with the palm facing down. According to these teachings, the real problem is not death. The real problem is the mind that meets death with fear, attachment, and confusion. This is also why there is an emphasis to put on conduct at the time of death so that you recognize the moment as another opportunity to practice. In everyday life, we spend numerous amounts of time trying to avoid thinking about death. Our culture teaches us to hide it, postpone it, and distract ourselves from it. Instead, it is something we prepare for. But in the Buddhist path, death is not something to avoid. In fact, the way we meet death can reveal the depth of our practice more clearly than almost anything else. Ironically enough, death is the most important moment of our entire life. Whatever state of mind dominates at death strongly influences the direction of consciousness afterwards. If our mind has never been trained, the moment of death can feel like losing everything we've known. Our body weakens, our senses fade, our control disappears. The ego reacts with panic. It wants to hold on to identity, possessions, relationships, and life itself. But mind training teaches us something radically different. It teaches that the moment of death can actually become one of the most powerful opportunities for awakening. Why? Well, because death strips away everything we normally cling to. All the roles we play in life, our job, our status, our opinions, our reputation suddenly all become meaningless. What remains is simply the mind itself. If that mind has been trained in compassion and awareness, then death is not just an ending, it becomes a part of the path. One of the most important instructions for the moment of death is generating bodhicitta. Bodhicitta means the awakened heart, the sincere wish that all beings be free from suffering and reach awakening. When death approaches, this practice is to shift attention away from the self-centered fear of my death and toward compassion for others. Khenpo Lojong gives a great example of a man in his village who was completely distraught at the time of his death because he couldn't take his belongings with him. We do not want to leave that way. Leading up to our death, we should be giving away as many possessions as we can to whoever is in most need. This will have a two-pronged effect. Not only will we release ourselves of clinging, but we will generate good last-minute karma. It's literally 89 Jordan hitting a jumper at the buzzer. One of the biggest ways we can show compassion at death and even after is to have all of our affairs together before we go. If you're starting to get up there in age, it's a great time to think about getting your will together and to tell your loved ones your wishes for when you go, especially those involving money. Finances don't end when we kick the bucket. Life keeps going on without us. And us younger people, don't ignore this either. There are plenty we can do too, such as keeping a list of all your login information, bank accounts, emails, social media. Write these down, put them somewhere for your loved ones to find. I have an example of how showing compassion in this way can be great, or it can be of detriment. December 23rd, 2022. My father unexpectedly took his final breath. I still have his Christmas present sitting in my closet. My parents separated when I was just 3 years old, but my dad made it a point to call me every single Sunday. Every Sunday he didn't have visitations. This went on my whole life. Sometimes it was hard for him to get to a phone. He struggled with mental health issues and was unhoused on and off during the decade before he passed. He still called every Sunday, though. I can easily say no one on this earth knew that man better than me. He was like a best friend and a dad. Everything I knew about him went out the window when he passed. He didn't leave a will, and suddenly I had no idea what his final wishes would be. He didn't have much, a government-funded apartment filled with the bare minimum. Still had no clue what to do with the stuff. All I ended up keeping was a backpack full of random papers that I still haven't gone through. The apartment manager, she ended up donating the rest. I was completely at a loss of what to do. There was no help from any other family members either. It was just me dealing with the final arrangements and grieving the loss of a beloved father. I recall being in the funeral home filling out papers, and they asked what his address was. I couldn't remember. I went to check Google Maps history. I couldn't remember how to use Google Maps. If you don't know, I've been a delivery driver on and off for different companies for over 12 years. I couldn't remember how to use a GPS. On a personal level, I felt this part of the book was very imperative. So please, do whatever you can to alleviate the future suffering of your loved ones. I know it can be a hard subject to think about and act on, but through the teachings of the Buddha and the power of Lojong, I'm able to sit here and hold a straight face, keep a steady mind, even though I'd want nothing to do more than cry. But it's through those trainings that I can firmly sit here and say, I still have emotions, but they no longer have me. I still have emotions, but they no longer have me. A traditional Lojong saying is this: train in the two, giving and taking alternately. Tonglen means giving and taking. This is the practice of exchanging self and others. On the inhale, you imagine taking in the suffering of others. On the exhale, you send out happiness, peace, and liberation. We did this 3 times today. At first, this sounds strange. Why would anyone willingly take on suffering? Well, because Tonglen directly challenged the deepest habits of the ego, which is self-protection. Ordinarily, we think, I want happiness for myself and less suffering for myself. Tonglen reverses this instinct. The trained practitioner thinks, may I take this suffering of all beings who are dying right now and carry it with me as I pass. In this way, death itself becomes an act of compassion. Why is this so powerful? Well, I'll tell you. Fear grows from self-clinging. The more tightly we hold on to the idea of me and mine, the more terrifying death becomes. But compassion dissolves that tight grip. When the mind opens to others, the ego relaxes, fear softens, the mind becomes vast instead of contracted. Another instruction is to transform adversity bring adversity onto the path. When we imagine dying, we might imagine pain, confusion, or sadness. But the Lojong teachings say that even these experiences can become practice. Physical pain can remind us of the suffering of countless beings. Weakness can remind us of impermanence. The loss of control can become an opportunity to release attachments. In this way, nothing is wasted. Every sensation, every emotion becomes material for awakening. Eventually, as the dying process deepens, the teachings say we move from relative bodhicitta to ultimate bodhicitta. This leads to a surprising insight taught by masters like Atisha and Patrol Rinpoche. They explain that relative bodhicitta is often harder than ultimate bodhicitta. That's why it was in the book that way. Ultimate bodhicitta is the realization of emptiness. In that state, one sees all phenomena lacking solid existence. But the relative bodhicitta asks something emotionally difficult: to open your heart to the suffering of others. And Tonglen asks us to move towards that suffering rather than away from it. This is why it is such a powerful, powerful training. At the deepest level of practice, the practitioner simply rests in awareness. Thoughts come and go, sensations come and go. Even the sense of self comes and goes. But awareness remains open, spacious, and luminous. Instead of grasping at experience or pushing it away, the practitioner rests in that openness. From this perspective, death is no longer a catastrophe. It becomes a transition within the vast nature of mind. Death is no longer an enemy. It becomes part of the path to enlightenment. Of course, this kind of stability doesn't simply appear in the last moment of life. It comes from training throughout our lives. Every time we practice patience instead of anger, we are training for death. Every time we respond to difficult compassion instead of resentment, we are training for death. Every time we remember impermanence instead of clinging to comfort, we are training for death. In other words, the way we live becomes the way we die. If we spend our lives cultivating awareness and compassion, those qualities are more likely to arise naturally when everything else falls away. This teaching can sound intense, but actually it's very encouraging. It means the ordinary moments of our lives can matter deeply. The traffic jam, an argument with a coworker, the frustration we feel when things don't go our way. Each of these moments is a chance to practice. Each of these moments is a chance to train the mind. Each moment prepares us for the most important transition we will ever face. So the real question is not simply how will we die? The real question is, how will we train our mind today? Because if the mind is trained in compassion, wisdom, and openness, then even death itself becomes part of the path to awakening. May this talk be of benefit to your life and the lives of all sentient beings everywhere. May you find peace and joy in the coming days. So before we wrap this up real quick, I just want to give a unscripted, heartfelt thank you to everyone who has ever taught me anything here at the Sangha House. It's the whole reason I'm sitting here right now. From from Yese Sergio to Daniel to any of you who have facilitated or given me any sort of instructions. Like, thank you, deeply thank you. And I also want to give out a big heartfelt thank you to Lama Matt, who has been an absolute wonderful teacher. And I don't think in like 100 million kapas I could repay his compassion, patience, and kindness. So thank you, Lama Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast. Music was provided by Barefoot Bran Music. Please consider supporting the Rime Buddhist Center by making a donation at our website at www.rimecenter.org/donate.